Thank you everybody for coming. I'm Josh Dolitsky. A little bit about me. I just started a company called BloodOrange, and we are specializing in CI/CD, cloud deployments, Kubernetes onboarding, and things like that. So if you need help with that after you've seen the talk and want to talk to me, let me know afterwards. I'm one of the Helm project org maintainers. Org maintainer is a little bit different than a core maintainer. I wasn't there from the start of the code base and not technically super involved. At this point I am, but involved in the code base of Helm. But I help oversee the overall health of the Helm ecosystem and the Helm project. The reason that I got involved with Helm is because I created a project called ChartMuseum. And ChartMuseum is an open source chart repo server. I'm going to talk all about chart repos later in the talk. And my interests include automating things, automating deployments, building prototypes, things with the cloud, and I have a lot of experience with CI and CD. My previous job, I worked at CodeFresh, which is a company that is a cloud-based CI product that specializes in Kubernetes. So, and before that, doing a lot of stuff with Jenkins. So I'm assuming that people here have heard about Kubernetes, but I'm not going to assume too much. So I'm going to just do a few slides about why people are using Kubernetes and why you might want to too. So this is a quote from the Illustrated Children's Guide to Kubernetes, and it's written as a children's book, but it really, I mean, you should go and read it. It's been donated to the CNCF, and it basically goes through, if you were describing containers and Kubernetes to your child, how you would describe it. And it uses all these different characters. This character is named Fippy. So I really encourage you to read it, but this is a great quote about why Kubernetes. The container was nice, but it was a little bit like having a fancy living room floating in the middle of the ocean. So, and specifically that line spoke to me about Kubernetes because I remember 2013, 2014, Docker was becoming a thing and spending a lot of time with Docker and containers. And it was this amazing thing. You can get your app running in a container. Once you have that container, great. How am I supposed to deploy this thing? I'm going to run some daemon on my like Ubuntu server to keep restarting my container, like what, and then you have things like ECS that came out from Amazon. So Kubernetes is really, to me, just a great opinionated way to run containers, and it's very powerful as well. And so Kubernetes, it solves a lot of hard problems that people are repeatedly solving in the DevOps space. So once you have a container that works for your application, it makes sure that your container is running and configured exactly as you want, and will always be running. So if you request that I have 3 instances of my container running, Kubernetes makes sure if one of them crashes from some strange panic error, it will bring up a third one and make sure that 3 are always running, never 4, never 2, always 3. And it will find a place to run it. Like you can have a cluster of 10 different nodes, and a node can go down that has 100 of your containers running. It will find a place throughout the rest of your cluster, the 9 nodes, to run that container and get your service back up and running. It has built-in service discovery, so when you're deploying an application, there's a specific DNS string that you know how you can address other things in the cluster. So if you're running a Redis, you don't need to know that you're in this cluster, in this region, in this namespace, and all these things. You can just say Redis as the host name, and your service knows how to talk to that Redis that's associated with it. Resource isolation and utilization. This is kind of just a containers thing, but Kubernetes is very good at it, and it's the fact that you're paying for your VMs and you're paying for your servers, and Kubernetes makes sure that you're getting the most out of your CPU memory, etc. And you can actually limit and say, this application only gets 50 megs of memory, so that you know that it's always going to perform at the same level. It prevents you from building your stack around a specific cloud's APIs. So perfect example is CloudFormation, very powerful API, and it works very good with Amazon. But maybe you started a job at a company that's using Google Cloud or Azure, or you have something on premise, and that skill set doesn't really transfer over. And it protects you from, all sorts of things that you might not want to use Amazon for. I'm not here to tell you why, but it has a common API. So if you know the Kubernetes skill set, you know how to work with any cloud that can host Kubernetes cluster, which is all of them. And this is the DevOps meetup. With Kubernetes, devs can do ops very easily. Every single API resource in Kubernetes is defined as YAML by default. So it's a configuration file versus some sort of programming language. The other reason why I'm really attracted to Kubernetes is the community. As you know, you can have a really great product and a really great open source project, but unless you have a community that supports it and is willing to give you that help that you need, it doesn't really mean anything, because it's not going to live on into the future. So Kubernetes has a really, really amazing community. People from different corporations who are literally part of their job title is work on Kubernetes core, to the people, individuals like me who are just doing a one-off project in the community. You have all these different people coming together, and despite being in direct competition, working on this project and moving it forward. And all of the major clouds, like Amazon, Azure, Google, etc., they all have their own now Kubernetes managed service. So even though Amazon has ECS and their custom way to do containers, they're embracing Kubernetes and saying, we support this, and we're bought in, basically. And there's an entire ecosystem of related tools. So Helm is one of them. There's an organization that's under the Linux Foundation called Cloud Native Computing Foundation. They're the people who run KubeCon. And there's all sorts of projects that are directly related to Kubernetes. So if you buy into this ecosystem, you have the support not only from the Kubernetes maintainers, but from the Helm maintainers, Prometheus maintainers, and all these people who are working together to make running things in Kubernetes successful. And then also, people are really eager to help you online. I don't know why they are so eager, but you get on Slack or you get on Twitter and you ask anyone anything, and you get the answer within minutes. So it's not like you're dredging through these forums and going through the 2010 archives of how to do something. It's like you can get this stuff in real time today. And here's a few statistics I pulled from the CNCF's website. The most recent KubeCon North America had 8,000 people. I think it's sold out. This number was I pulled yesterday. There's a real-time stat on the CNCF website. That's the number of contributors, so people who have done a code commit or something of that nature to one of the projects under CNCF, and that's over 59,000. And then 88 is the number of certified Kubernetes distributions. So talking about cloud support, you have literally 88 providers that will give you a cluster and manage your Kubernetes cluster for you. So if you need any more convincing that Kubernetes is continuing to grow, here you are. But lastly, Kubernetes is a very powerful tool, but with that power comes a lot of complexity. So it has an API that has these great abstractions of common DevOps-y things, such as a service, such as a secret, for example, a deployment. But they don't have a concept of how you group those together. They have labels, which you can use in a custom way and say, I want this traffic to go to things with this label, but it doesn't really have a way to describe an application. So you can define these resources as YAML, but it's only a static file that you're sending across the API. And really with like a day's work, you can go through the documentation or some tutorials and get your application that's already been successfully put in a container running in Kubernetes. But the question is, once it's running in Kubernetes, how does my friend run this app in Kubernetes? How does the team over here that needs to deploy it run it in Kubernetes? And so the question is, how do we manage all this complexity? And the answer to that is Helm, which is the package manager for Kubernetes. So if you were to go out today and decide, I want a WordPress, I want to spike Kubernetes, I want to run WordPress in Kubernetes. The steps that you would do to do that, you would basically look up go on Docker Hub, for example. You find this is the most starred Docker image that runs WordPress, probably provided by WordPress itself. And then you would figure out what are all the different Kubernetes resources that I need to describe this. So you would have a deployment that brings up the container. But then you have questions like, oh, well, this needs a database, right? So you need Postgres. And then you'd be like, okay, so you go down that rabbit hole with Postgres. And you'd figure out first how I run Postgres, and then how do I pass that connection string and the password and all this stuff back to this WordPress that I kind of half-assed put up over here. And once that's all done, you've spent a whole day doing this, it's kind of like it's out there in your cluster, and you have this stuff running in your cluster, and you don't know the steps you did to do it. So Helm really simplifies the idea of deploying a single application into your cluster. And so this is all you need to install WordPress into your cluster today. You run this command once you install Helm, and it will, you look at your cluster and it gives you a URL, and you have WordPress running. So it's as simple as this. A few things about Helm. I see Helm as an application-centric tool. So it's all about your application. It defines a new type of package, which is referred to as chart. And all that a chart is it's a collection of Kubernetes resource YAML files. And they're templatized, so you can do different things with them and change them between dev and prod, etc. And it has several commands such as install, remove, or install, delete, upgrade, rollback that allow you to manage the application's lifecycle. It stores a revision history of your application installed in the cluster, so you can easily do rollbacks. If something goes wrong in live production, you can say Helm rollback to the revision where you know it's working. And it's actually, as Bridget was saying earlier, it's a roll forward. But yeah, it allows you to kind of like see all the different changes and diffs between your different upgrades in the application. And it also knows everything that's running in your cluster. Like how many times do you have server clusters running out there and you don't know I don't know where my money's going and what are all these things running? You can run a Helm list command and it'll show you everything that's been installed with Helm so that you can go and delete it and upgrade it and things like that. So Helm charts. A Helm chart is a collection of files related to a set of Kubernetes resources that's laid out in a specific directory tree. So different files are required for the chart to run. And very basically, there's several different opinionated file names, which you can see in the documentation. But the three most important ones are chart.yaml. And it's a YAML file that describes the chart itself. So this is the name of my application. This is the version. These are the emails for the people you can bug when something breaks. Keywords if you have some sort of search mechanism for Helm charts. Values YAML defines default configuration for that application. For example, we talked about running a WordPress chart. In the values YAML, you will have a ref to a Docker image and a Docker image tag that runs that application. And then templates, this is all these different resources I was referencing before that compose the application and make it run well together. And they're templatized, which I'll go into in a second. So YAML templating, this is sort of what Helm does. It makes it so that when you install an application in dev, you can also run it in prod given a specific different configuration values. So here's an example of a values YAML. So you will have maybe a Docker, this is an image hosted on Docker Hub, and the tag to that image. Replicas is the Kubernetes way of saying number of instances of my container I want to run. And here's an associated deployment template that sits under that templates directory. And you can see with these kind of curlies, this is using Go templating language to take things from here and plug them into here. So given these defaults in this template, and you run an install on your chart, this is the resulting thing. So you have the two here and the image, the Docker image composed there, right? However, let's say I have a new version of my image, 1.2. You can override the defaults on the command line using either the --set or the -f command to basically pass in overrides to the default. And so in this way, you can imagine the many different ways you can actually do conditionals and for loops and all sorts of things in these templates to create very dynamic charts for your application. Helm is a package manager, so it's similar to brew, yum, apt-get, sort of. But it's not like if you do brew install Node.js and you have this one Node.js on your computer. If you do a Helm install on a chart, you can actually install multiple versions of the chart. So imagine a blue-green scenario. You may want to install one version of the chart. You'd probably have some certain values for the blue. Green, you'd have certain overrides for the green. And you can actually have two or more versions of your application running in the same Kubernetes cluster. Chart repositories. So this is sort of how you can distribute charts to different teams in your organization or to the public. All a chart repository is a location that hosts your charts for download. It's extremely easy to set up. You just have to have a file called index.yaml. It's a specific format that says, here's all the different charts in my repo, and here's their versions, and this is where you can go download them. You can really easily set this up in a static web service, put it up in something like S3, GitHub Pages, any other static, Nginx, whatever have you. Or ChartMuseum, which is the project that I maintain, is sort of for a more advanced use case. You can point it at different sorts of cloud storage and dynamically get this index.yaml file. It provides basic and token authentication, and it also has its own API for uploading charts. So if you're hosting your charts in an S3 bucket, you would maybe AWS S3 copy them into the bucket. With ChartMuseum, it's kind of agnostic to where my backend storage is and sits in front of your storage. And this is an example of how you can use something. So Bitnami is a company that has all sorts of great charts that they maintain. So if you want to have access to all the things that Bitnami has, for example, RabbitMQ, You just add it to your local with this Helm repo add command, and then you install it with name of repo / name of chart. And then this kind of brings us into the Helm Hub. So Helm Hub is a community project that's that's hosted by the Helm maintainers, or the Helm charts maintainers rather, and it's based on a project called Monocular, which is the UI for this. But what it does is it allows people, so for example, you see JFrog here, GitLab, Bitnami. They have their own repos with their own charts to install things for either for community-based projects or for their specific things. So JFrog maybe has an Artifactory chart. And you can come here, and Helm Hub is constantly scanning all these repos and seeing the latest versions or new charts that they have available. And you can come here and search here and find a chart to deploy. So if you want to deploy Jenkins on your cluster, I don't know where to find that. You come here, type in Jenkins, find the top results, Helm install, repo name / Jenkins. And that's at hub.helm.sh. And really quick, the sort of where Helm came from. It's been around for quite a while now. At the end of 2015, the company Deis had an internal hackathon, and they were just trying to. The idea was an app store for Kubernetes. So they came up with something called Kate's Place, which was renamed later to Helm. And then the first KubeCon was at the end of that year, and they presented it there, and that was Helm 1. In 2016, Google was actually working on a related project, and they came together and collaborated and combined them and released Helm 2.0. 2017, the company that was mainly maintaining this Deis was acquired by Microsoft, meaning extra support, extra marketing stuff. This is the year that I learned about Helm and learned about Kubernetes, and I worked on and released ChartMuseum. In 2018, they had their own summit, or their own conference in Portland, and Helm joined the CNCF as a project. So it was no longer the Deis project. Well, it was actually part of Kubernetes. I won't go into the history, but being part of CNCF is a really big deal because it's not just a Microsoft thing. It's not just a Deis thing. It's a community thing. And we talked about CNCF's ecosystem and all this great stuff. This was also when the Helm Hub was launched. And then this year, Helm 3 alpha candidate. So Helm 3 has been talked about for quite a while now. They actually released an alpha candidate that you can download today and play with. And the second Helm Summit is in, I believe, September in Amsterdam. So if you're super interested in Helm and you want to travel to Europe to learn more about it, you can meet us in Amsterdam. And with that, I'm going to dive into a live demo, so pray for me. And if you want this, I put this online just a few hours ago under BloodOrange IO/meme lords. The last one was it was pretty small. It was like 200, 250, I think. But this one will probably be larger and have some Europeans. Make it a little bigger. So we talked about how Helm knows what's in your cluster. So the way that you find that out is Helm list command. In the SPS internet. It worked earlier, so. All right. All right, so this is the typical view of Helm list. Just to go over all these different columns, this is the release name. So we talked about that blue-green scenario. This is a unique release name for that chart. Revision, this is the number of times that this chart has been upgraded in the cluster. This is the last time that it has been upgraded. This is whether it's been deployed or the deployment failed, etc. This is the actual chart that that release is based on. This is the version of the application, so that chart YAML file that has metadata, it has information about the actual version of the application it's running, which is actually different than the chart version. You can see this Nginx one 349. 349 is the semver of the Nginx Ingress chart, but the actual version of Nginx is 0.24, which sounds wrong, so I'm not sure. Might be the Nginx Ingress controller. And then this is the namespace, so I won't go into Kubernetes namespaces in this talk, but there are ways to segregate different things. So what I have here running is 3 base services that I set up before, and in this repo I have a make file that shows you how to set these things up if you're interested in running this. This is running on a DigitalOcean $10 a month server that, if you have $10, I recommend clicking the button and getting this. But so it has Nginx Ingress, which allows us to route traffic into the cluster. It has Cert Manager, which is an amazing project that works with Let's Encrypt. And anytime you deploy a new thing into your cluster that has a resource called an ingress, it will actually attach, it will go request a TLS certificate for the domain that you want and attach it to your service automatically. And I'll show you that in a minute. It takes about 30 seconds. And then Brigade server. Brigade is another CNCF project that allows you to do CI/CD type things, and I'll go all into Brigade, but it's probably content for another talk. But the cool thing about Brigade is it runs on top of Kubernetes, so it's anytime, instead of having like slaves or minions like a Jenkins, anytime it has a request to run a new job, it actually spins up a pod in Kubernetes, which is pretty neat. And then the demo that I'm about to give is an app called memelords.net, which was an idea that my little sister had. Her and her friend started a text conversation with me where we were posting all these memes. Kind of got inappropriate, but so I had this idea of memelords.net where I can get family-friendly memes to share with my sister, and so I can show you what that application looks like right now as it is. And what it does is it goes to an API called, what is it called? icanhasdadjoke.com, and it gets a random dad joke, and then it also, okay. And then it has another API call that goes to Jiffy API and gets a image with the tag smile. So I don't know why that last one. Okay. Anyway, I'll refresh one more time. So that's my application. I can show you the source really quick. I don't know why this screen is flashing on me. Simple Python app using the Falcon framework, which I'm told is like the new hotness in Python. So here's the request to get the dad joke. Here's the request to get the image.
You resize that just a little bit.
Yeah, let me. I've never done that.
Oh, stop doing it. Scrolling face.
I've never done this on my editor. Okay. Hold on. All right. Okay. A little better, yeah? Okay. So Falcon, it's kind of like Express.js. You just say route and then class that has my get, post, delete, etc. So the root route of the app gets some text from the dad joke API, gets an image from Jiffy, runs this function that I have that makes it HTML, and then makes that the response body. Pretty advanced stuff. I had to use Python for this. And then in this directory, again, this is all, I will share these with the meetup group with the slides and everything. But this is available on this BloodOrange IO/memealerts. There's a Docker file in here, right? So this, I don't want to go into Docker. I think that's pretty well known. But so all it's doing is basing on the Python 3 Alpine image, which is like a tiny Linux, and then taking my app.py and putting it into the container, or into the base image. And then I have a deploy directory that contains a Helm chart. So this is what a Helm chart looks like in real life. You have this chart.yaml. And here's some basic description about it. A Helm chart for Kubernetes. I should probably change that to home for memes. The name of the app, the version of the app. Here's the values file. So you can see the image repository is based on a Docker Hub image that's public, and the tag is master. So I'm doing like the Git ops where I'm pushing to, when I push to a branch, that's my tag. So the baseline is going to be the master, what's in the master branch of that repository. And just to show you what this sort of results in, this is a deployment. We had that simple example in the slides before. These sorts of things, these includes are sort of baseline things you get when you create a new chart, which you can actually do with Helm chart or just Helm create. So it actually has this scaffolding ability. So most of this I copied from the baseline Helm chart that's created. But anyway, containers. This is the important part. So we say how many pods we want to run. So in this case, I think the default was 2. And then you want to see, this is the image that I want to run. And then I'm passing some basic environment variables into here, which I'll show you in a sec. That's using Python. It has this Git Commit and Git branch, which I'm using to. I have a /version route that will just kind of give me some sanity about which version is really running here. So let's make sure that's right. Yep, FE7 something. So let's do something interesting here. Can I get a suggestion for new Jiffy tag that's appropriate for the meetup? What? Psi. Okay. So because I have Brigade set up, again, this is a whole nother talk. I will drive in again and give a Brigade talk. But when you push a new it kind of like responds to these events, which is really nice. So when you push to the repo, it basically builds and pushes the Docker image, and then it deploys the Helm chart. And if you look at a little bit deeper into the Helm chart command, this is what you would run here. So I'm passing in the new image tag that's created, which in this case is actually going to override master, but we won't, whatever. All right, so let's turn this into tag is sci. And maybe let's change the color because, just so we know things are working here. And Brigade will actually work with non-master branches, so I'll kind of show you how you can create dynamic environments. So if you're opening a PR, you can pick up an event, and you can do this with Jenkins and all these other things. Pick up an event and say, oh, this is for this PR, and deploy a new version of your app that's not on memelords.net, that's on pr123.memelords.net. And so let's really quick see here. Okay, so let's just double check what we have here. We're changing smile to sci, and we are changing the background color. So I'm not sure that I want this in production. I need my project manager to sign off on it. So I'm going to check out a new branch. We'll call it Minneapolis. Is that spelled right? That's spelled right. And we'll push it to this new branch. And then I'm going to come here as, just a developer and said, hey, I want somebody do a code review on this thing. And I open this. So in our Brigade definition, we react to the pull request opened event here. And what we're doing is we have this variable called ingress host. So ingresses are pretty interesting in Kubernetes. Combined with this cert manager thing, if you put this simple tag on an ingress, TLS acme true, it will go and get a cert from Let's Encrypt and attach it to your service. And so you just basically define this is the host that I want. So if I do kubectl get ingress and wait for the internet. Yeah, you can see that this is basically routing traffic. I have DNS for memelords on DigitalOcean, pointing to a load balancer that is set up by the Nginx ingress controller. And because this rule is here, it knows put traffic to this thing. And I think I kind of skipped over it, but Here are my pods that are running as part of the memlords application. You can ignore these. I won't get into that. If you push a new branch, it pushes another release. But if I open this up and I do kubectl get pod, it should describe the environment of that pod. Yeah, so there's that git commit that we saw on the / version. And really quick, I'm going to do a watch on this. Maybe I'll increase that a little bit. So we can see an upgrade occur. Okay, so I opened up this pull request. And if I go to my Brigade thing, oh no, it looks like my webhooks might be broken. All right, well, we'll roll with it. Okay, so if you push a branch, it basically gives it a different ingress. It gives it branch name .memlords.net. So now if I go to, it should be minneapolis.memlords.net. You can see branch Minneapolis, commit 246, yada yada. And we should get some size. That's great. That's really great. All right. So yeah, so we have the approval. This is good to go. We're going to merge it into master. Sorry I couldn't show you the GitHub flow, but we'll do it live. Let's do git push origin master. What am I missing here? All right, so that got picked up as the push to master. And let's go back to this watch command. All right, so I have my 2 pods for the memlords.net, and I have the 2 pods for the Minneapolis.memlords.net. So I just pushed to master, and this is going to now build my Docker image, and it will push it to, I'll make this a little larger, pushes it up to BloodOrange memlords master. And then the next step is it should do a Helm upgrade command. Oh, we're going to lose it. Awesome. So you can see that here's a new version of the app. It's coming up. 0.1 means it's not ready. Kubernetes has a built-in health check mechanism that makes sure, if your application is starting to start up, it'll make sure that, 5 times in a row it has hit this health endpoint. So for us, it's just the root route. But you can see this old version is now coming down now that we have 2 that are already successfully running. So it does this sort of rolling upgrade. There's different ways, and that's part of Kubernetes about how you can do upgrades. But as long as you have 2 replicas, you'll have 0 downtime when you're doing upgrades like that. So now if I go back to memlords.net, we have size. So there you go. I know this is great stuff. So a little bit more life cycle before I pop out of the demo. Do a Helm list one more time. So I have that. If the PR thing was working, you'd see the automated delete, but it's not. So we have now, we talked about having 2 versions of our app running in the cluster. Oh, I hate that size. Okay, so we have the main one, and then we have this, the Minneapolis one. We don't need that anymore. It's in prod. We're just taking up container space. So the way that you get rid of that is with the Helm Delete. And that's sort of your uninstall for Helm. It's perfect. It's totally perfect. And now with the list, I expect that there is no meme lords branch Minneapolis. Yep. Yep. And if you want to learn more about Brigade, it's brigade.sh. And this will go into, how to install it, how to use it. And then also, I think I mentioned this briefly earlier, but I made sure that this repo works with a fresh, at least DigitalOcean. It should work with any other cluster provider. But I have make commands in here to install Nginx Ingress, which will give you a load balancer to point your DNS to, and how to install Brigade. And then I didn't go into Tiller. We didn't talk about Tiller, but Helm actually has a server-side component, and Helm will talk to that, and Tiller will actually provision your resources. I didn't go into Tiller because the next version of Helm, Helm 3, is actually removing Tiller. So if you have, So if you have hit your head against the wall trying to secure Tiller and protect your users, you will soon need not worry. And there's actually already an alpha release of Helm, if you weren't aware, that you can install today, and it will work without Tiller completely. It stores releases and secrets now, so before they were config maps. There's also talks about potentially doing a CRD. We're waiting for some community feedback about that. Releases are bound to a namespace, so you can secure and say this team can only use Helm in this namespace, and you don't require Tiller to have like God mode on the whole cluster. Some other interesting things, schematized values. So you can actually, we saw that values YAML file that has, this is my Docker image and this is the tag. You can say this must be, for example, I won't make those types of promises, but you can say this can be an integer, this must be a string, and things like that. So you catch the error before your pods and your containers are just dying. And then the last item is something that I have fallen into and found myself involved with, is this concept of doing more advanced things with chart distribution. So if you're familiar with using the Docker CLI and doing Docker pool into content addressable store from a Docker registry, there's actually work going on to do Helm pool, Helm push from a Docker registry. So you can literally run the Docker registry image, and in Helm 3 alpha, you can push charts there instead of to chart repo or ChartMuseum. So just for the people who didn't understand why people were excited about Tiller going away, basically what's going on today is you have this component called Tiller installed in the cluster. Helm will not work without this. There are also hacks you can do where you can actually put this out here and then talk here, and it goes like that, but it's a hack. And this communicates using its own protocol from the client side, and then Tiller actually goes out and creates the actual Kubernetes resources in the cluster. So in Helm 3, it's just going right to the API. There's historical reasons why this wasn't done in the first place that I won't go into, But this is really good because if you can secure your Kubernetes API, you can secure Helm installations. So here's sort of a screenshot of using Helm 3 to pull from a registry. So you may recognize this. This looks sort of similar to a Docker pool. It's a little bit more lightweight. Helm charts are usually less than a megabyte, so it's not quite as, it doesn't take as long, let's say. But we can do interesting things here, and this actually is built on top of an API or a specification called the Open Container Initiative Distribution Specification. There's a lot of history in container worlds that I will also not go into, and nor do I have all the context, but there was a specification that was launched so that Docker wasn't the only people that could provide these types of things. There's a specification that's based on top of the Docker registry API called OCI distribution spec. And what happened is people from Microsoft's container registry team saw that the spec did not require that the things that use this API were a container image. So they started to ask questions, and they were experimenting with using ChartMuseum behind the scenes. They were talking to me about it. They decided to create a shim that when you do a Helm push from the Azure CLI, it actually sort of converts it into a Docker image and puts it into the registry itself. And it turned into this whole community talk, and now this concept is being brought to different projects in the ecosystem. I put this slide up. If you're interested in this concept specifically of OCI and push-pull outside of Docker, outside of the context of Docker, there is a project that that team that did the container registry work, open source, called Oris, which stands for OCI Registry as Storage. And I became involved with the project because I was spiking how to do these things with Helm. So now Oris is actually a dependency of Helm 3. So if you want push-pull in your project that's written in Go, you can import this and start doing things with that. And we're also looking for contributions and things like that. And here's just a little plug for a project I'm working on called BundleBar. It's located at bundle.bar. And this is sort of just a public registry hosting these types of things. So you can now today go to bundle.bar, install the Helm 3 Alpha client, and start downloading charts using Helm Pool from bundle.bar. And it has over 600 charts that I have basically mirrored from the Helm Hub site that I was showing earlier. And the second plug, I mentioned I just started a company called BloodOrange, and I'm looking for potential clients that need help with these types of things. So if you're interested in an extra hand with Kubernetes or Helm or even containers, CI, general cloud stuff, please have a word with me afterwards, or you can also find me on the internet, Dolitsky, or also josh@bloodorange.io, and we can talk offline. Thank you very much. And also special thank you to Bridget for bringing me out here and encouraging me to come speak. Thank you.
So I think it's possible that some people may have a few questions. And if you do have some questions, bear in mind that we get this talk first, and then Wisconsin gets some later. He's giving this talk tomorrow in Madison, and the day after that in Milwaukee. So if you have questions, even if they sound like simple questions, but if it was something that wasn't clear to you, you could help our cheese-eating brethren across the St. Croix. by asking your question now. All right. Everyone wants to help Wisconsinites. I love it.
Just when is Helm 3 going to be out?
That's a good question, and I am not at liberty to answer. But there's, I do know there is, there's 3 planned alphas, and this is all on. If you go to GitHub Helm/community, sort of like the general plan for the alpha releases are out. So you can see what's going to come in Helm Alpha 2 or Helm 3 Alpha 2 and Helm 3 Alpha 3. After that will be a beta, and then after that, I would. It's hard to say, but the Helm Summit is in September in Amsterdam.
Yeah,
And
I feel like this is one of those things where no one's going to promise you anything, but
Yeah.
I would be sort of surprised if there's not something for you to do and see at Helm Summit.
I would
So-
imagine one of the alphas or beta will be September.
This is a really good talk, but one of the questions
Thank you.
I've struggled with Helm is, before you do the Helm install command, is there an expectation that you create PVCs, namespace, and any role binding accounts for where it's going to go? I just can't get it to
Yeah,
work.
no. So there's several different patterns there, and it kind of depends on how dynamic your storage is. Like we looked at the values YAML, and you can just pass a string, like you're saying you've already provisioned it beforehand. There are ways, if you have a dynamic storage backend, to auto provision. Like for example, if you do the Helm install WordPress example, it'll automatically give you a volume if your cluster supports the automatic claims and stuff like that. But it's not really a Helm thing. Yeah.
Okay, that was an awesome talk, and I learned more about Brigade and Search Manager, Cert Manager, I think. But so let's say hypothetically you have somebody who manually edits a Kubernetes configuration, and then you run
Sure.
Helm to try to blow that away, and it doesn't because it doesn't think there are any changes. Is there a way around that?
So
Like if I
What-
go into the deployment and I edit
Yeah.
some part of the deployment, and then I try to redeploy an existing Helm chart with the same configuration, it doesn't know I've manually changed the deployment, so it thinks I'm still running the same version.
oh right, yeah. I mean, that's sort of like user error, but no.
Yeah, totally. But I want to blow away the user error.
Yeah, no, I get you. So I think I showed you how I was like throwing in the Git commit in there. You can do small things like in the annotations or the labels that are just like passing in a unique ID, which will force a restart of things every time you do upgrade. So it's a it's a feature, not a bug, that it doesn't change it if there's no changes, because you want your services to stay up. But if you want to always restart stuff, you can put in like just some thing that's unique to that deployment. Sure.
Some people at my company are pushing to use the Helm 3 Alpha right now. What should we watch out for?
The registry stuff is very much in progress, so I wouldn't put a lot of resources on that right now. Maybe wait 1 or 2 months, and you can also reach out to me directly, Slack or Twitter or whatever. I'm kind of like, that's kind of my project right now. The tillerless stuff, I would say go for it. It's good to go. No problem.
So when we run Helm, we only store the charts in Git.
Yeah.
We do not use ChartMuseum or anything like that. One thing I noticed as part of your Brigade pipeline, that's when you actually set the version tags and everything like that.
Yeah.
So you never store those in SCM?
So
Other than like a Git log.
yeah,
or
so
Git
this,
commit.
so the demo did no chart repository stuff at all. I didn't mention. So we looked at chart repositories. You can install from a local chart and never use repositories, right? Like you're saying. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing about, it's sort of you're updating that stuff in the defaults and bumping the version in a manual type of release step. I've also written a lot of sed scripts that
Right,
push it back to Git, and
that's pretty much what we do as part of our pipeline. And I don't know if you had opinions on where you should do
No.
it versus whatnot? Because some developers do it one way, then the other ones just completely change that, and then
Yeah,
you run
and then
into
there's
that
also
problem he
people-
said.
Yeah, and then there's other people that just don't version them at all, and they just look at your Git history, and that's that. And so it's really about what works for you. The chart repositories, I would not put effort into ChartMuseum or chart repositories if you are the only team using Helm right now. Stick it in Git, install it from Git. The minute you have an office in Wisconsin or Chicago that needs to use your Helm chart, we didn't go into Helm dependencies, but you can actually make charts a dependency. So you can have just one app that's called company chart, and I have team A, B, C, D that are installed as like a dependent chart as part of that. So I wouldn't, unless you see the need for it, I wouldn't touch it really. And people, it's semantic versioning is the only thing that's really enforced. Besides that, it's sort of like, yeah.
Do you find that
Hey.
do you find that the most enterprises use the off-the-shelf stable charts in production, or do they kind of try it out, tweak it a little bit, and then end up having to fork it for their?
Yeah. So if you actually go on Helm Hub, it's kind of funny. I think they're working on some UI improvements, but like you'll search a certain chart like MySQL, and you'll see like all these companies have their own MySQL, but then you look at the README and it's the same. So they've obviously forked it and made some changes. It depends how serious you are about that thing, right? If you need your Redis to work a certain way, yes, fork it. I would definitely always fork it and make changes. And then a lot of people will they'll fork it, make their changes, get them into a state that's sort of like dynamic and configurable, like it'll work with the stable thing and yours, and submit it back upstream. So, but yeah, there's a lot of just like I clone this thing and put it in my own repo over here, for sure, no problem.
So I'm kind of,
Hey.
I know very little about any of this, but
Okay.
You were talking about the ChartMuseum.
Yeah.
And does that or will that support immutable updates?
What do you mean by immutable? Like if you upload a chart once, it can't be uploaded again?
It cannot be modified in that state.
So yeah, so there's a I'm forgetting my own thing, but it's either by default it doesn't allow overwrites on the upload. There's a flag that I believe it's called disable overwrite, that in the Helm chart for ChartMuseum is automatically disabled. So they disabled the disable, so you can't upload. Speaking of ChartMuseum, I do have limited edition ChartMuseum stickers that I printed myself here, so if you want them. And Helm's glow-in-the-dark Helm stickers as well that were sent to me by Karen at Microsoft. So, but yeah, it's sort of like, people are doing repos all sorts of different ways. So it's yeah, check out the project, and if you have issues, let me know.
Question back here. You were so helpful teaching us a bunch. It sounds like you're in an alpha state with the next release. What can we do to be helpful for you? Are there certain environments you're looking for people to test in? Are there certain patterns that haven't been explored yet that we can maybe support and open issues for?
I should have talked a little bit more about Helm. I should have put a slide about Helm's community. Every Thursday, 11:30 Central, there's a public call. And a lot of times it's like we wait for people to come on and just ask, how can I help? And we've had a lot of people come on, and we now have people who are now core maintainers that are doing stuff. One of the ways, like, people always want to get involved on the code level, which I understand, I totally get. One of our core maintainers came in by just responding to the issue queue. So we have like thousands of unopened things. So like if you are seeing things come in under Helm 3 and want to ask about that, or even just run Helm 3 on your own and open an issue, there's so much stuff like that the people who wrote the thing haven't tried in real life. So I did a tweet about the registry stuff, like, please break the registry stuff. If you want to help me specifically, break the registry stuff.
And if they want to find the info for the calls, that's all right on the front page of helm.sh.
Yes. Yep. Yep.
Good question. Thank you. All right. Anything more from this quadrant of the room? I feel like we've been hovering in the back. You're all like, we sat in front. What do you want from us?
Yeah, and if for some reason I don't get to chat with you, there's a lot of people. I would love to, talk to you over email or Zoom or whatever later on. So,
And they can
please
find you on
stay.
the Kubernetes Slack.
Kubernetes Slack, which actually blocked uploads blocked signups because of inappropriate behavior. There's another Slack under CNCF that allows open signups. I'm on there. If you go, I have Dolitsky.io, and it has like a laundry list of places you can find me online.
All right. Without further ado, thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you.